Welcome back. And when do we sell? This can change your life if you sell at the right times and buy low and sell high. We are in the midst of what I believe is the final stages of the 2024 Bitcoin halvings bull run. And again, this final stage can last for probably around 6 months or so. As we've been discussing on this channel, the 12 to 18 month period after the Bitcoin halving, which we are in, this is historically, based on previous cycles, the most volatile time and most uptrending time in the markets. And so we need to understand, when do we sell? What are the catalysts that we're looking for in the market that are telling us time to sell? And maybe this is one of them. Bitcoin yet to hit 150,000 because outsiders are ghosting, according to Michael Saylor. So we're going to break it all down. We're going to be talking about what's going on in the markets, what really the macro strategy is, from what Michael Saylor is doing to what governments are doing to what a lot of other companies that are following what MicroStrategy's thesis is, and also looking at what's happening in the altcoin space with Ethereum, Solana, and some of the others. But not just crypto. We also have to look at crypto proxy stocks similar to MicroStrategy, but also in the Bitcoin mining space, because the Bitcoin mining companies, they've done basically round trips over the last year or so. You can see Marathon Digital. We went from $15 all the way up to $30, then back down to $13, then back up to $30, and now we're back to basically multi-year lows. And this, as Bitcoin continues to kind of move at full steam into what I think is the final stages of the bull market. But when do we sell? We're going to be discussing that in today's video. Don't forget to give the video a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, that way you never miss a new video, and let's get right into today's topics, starting out. Now, as you guys know, Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, says to ditch fake money for Bitcoin, gold, and silver. Now, one of the things that we have to think about when we're talking about where we are in the cycle is what your time horizon is, right? Somebody like Michael Saylor, Robert Kiyosaki, these guys are looking at generational wealth. They're looking at these guys are major investors, right? They're not like people like us that are just trying to get by, just trying to pay our bills, just trying to secure our retirement, right? There's a different level of wealth there. And so understanding kind of where we are in the cycle and what our investment thesis and portfolio is. I mean, really, the idea is to increase your wealth, right? Increase your dollar valuation. Now, we know the dollar is getting devalued, but I mean, if you're just holding dollars for a year or two while you're waiting for the markets to rotate into a bear market or a bull market, I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing, right? And people are saying, well, you should own as much Bitcoin as you want. Well, the way to get more Bitcoin is to also potentially trade the rest of the market, wait for the bull market to sell some of the altcoins, and then wait for the bear market to buy Bitcoin. And a lot of people do this strategy where in the bull market, they'll rotate out of Bitcoin into altcoins, and then the bear market rotate back. But they are taking profits along the way. And this is where a lot of people get it messed up. They don't take profits along the way. And then we're out of the bull market, and then they're like, wait, we have one more pump, one more pump, one more pump. This is what we've been talking about with the quote unquote extended cycle that we keep hearing about in crypto, based on really nothing besides opinions, right? It's not based on the data and historical data of the markets. And so determining when we sell our crypto, how we exit this market, it's very, very difficult. But here's the deal. Most people are going to try to time the top of the market. They think that like the billionaires are going to come out one day and say, guys, today's the top. So very orderly and very calmly, just go to the exchange and sell all your crypto. And don't worry, there's way more than enough liquidity for every single person to sell on the same day at the same time while the billionaires are doing it. No, that's not how it's going to happen at all. The billionaires are going to sell, and they're going to tell you after, and then the market is going to crater. Now, whether this actually happens exactly how I'm saying it or not, or whether we see some of these over-leveraged companies in Bitcoin who are buying the top of the market, well, if the price goes down below that, well, we'll be in a bear market. But you have to be out of the market before that actually occurs. If it does occur, we don't even know if it's going to occur. And that's the whole thing with analyzing the market and what we do on this channel. A lot of people in the comments will say, Cryptoviser, you're wrong. You've been wrong previous. I'm not 100% right, and no investor is 100% right. You're looking for the edge in the market. right? What is the likelihood that Bitcoin is going to go higher compared to, let's say, Solana? I would put my money more on Bitcoin going up over the course of time as more of a safe investment, and Solana more of kind of a bet, like a gamble on the table, right? Both of them are still bets and both of them are gambles. But in my view, based on my analysis, I believe Bitcoin is a safer bet than Solana. A lot of people may disagree with that. That's fine. You put your money where you believe. But on this channel, we're talking about making money and what my investment analysis and thesis is. You may disagree with it, and that's fine. And I may be wrong, and that's fine. We're not going to be right 100% of the time, and we're not going to agree 100% of the time. But we have to understand, what are the signals that will let us know we potentially are at the top? So Robert Kiyosaki calls on Americans to reject fiat currency and embrace Bitcoin, gold, and silver, warning that central banks are eroding wealth. And I think the thing to add to this is that now the banks are getting involved in crypto as well, which should tell you and me that obviously Bitcoin and crypto are the future of digital money. Anyway, in a May 10th post, Kiyosaki backed a hardline stance against central bank systems like the Federal Reserve, quoting a former U.S. congressman. He said that fake money leads to dishonest money, dishonest statistics, and dishonest accounting, dishonest balance sheet, dishonest compensation, dishonest relations, leaders, and corruption in everyday life. He says to fight back by opting out of fiat systems and instead embracing decentralized stores of value like Bitcoin and precious metals like gold, silver, etc. And so this is definitely something that we have to think about, because this is what the situation is. We know they're going to continue to devalue the currency through inflation. I mean, the Federal Reserve tells us this, right? They don't like 4% inflation or 3% inflation, but 2%, that's okay, right? Based on what? Like what makes it okay to continue to inflate by 2%? Every single year. That's a very slow drain of the dollar. And most people don't fully understand this. And this is why a lot of people don't have savings. But this brings us to Michael Saylor, who says that outsiders are ghosting the Bitcoin strategy. So Michael Saylor says that Bitcoin hasn't reached $150,000 yet because holders with long-term outlook have been selling off while a new cohort of investors are beginning to enter the market. He said, I think we're going through a rotation right now. Now, I would agree with this. One of the things that we've been talking about is when MicroStrategy is purchasing, the ETFs are selling. And if the ETFs are not selling, who is providing the liquidity? Who's providing the Bitcoin for MicroStrategy to purchase? People are like, oh, well, I'm hodling forever. There's no way. Like, no, people are selling their coins at $100,000, at $80,000, at $70,000. Even though the whole market and the whole world is really bullish on crypto, generally speaking, why would people be selling at that point? Like, if you know that, or if you believe, I should say, if you believe Bitcoin's going to $1 million or $500,000, why would you not wait to sell? Well, here's the deal, guys. Investors don't look at what the potential return is. They look at what the actual return is. So if somebody purchased at $20,000 and now we're at $100,000, it's a 5x. If somebody purchased at $500, you do the math there, right? It's a 200x increase or 20,000% increase in the price. I mean, they're still in the green, and they're probably going to rotate into other assets or other cryptos or other investments that maybe are a little bit safer after that huge run to the upside from where they were. People who are worried about where the prices are or worried about where the top of the market is, typically these people don't know what the F they're doing. And second, most of these people have bought the top already. That's why they cannot sell their coins, because it has to go to 200,000. This is why it's important to understand buy low, sell high. Because in the bull market, like from now until the bear market, personally speaking, I don't think there should be anybody buying the market, right? Especially for short-term holds or for long-term holds, because exactly what MicroStrategy is doing, like they keep buying the top of the market, and all of these other companies that are buying Bitcoin are also buying the top of the market. This is a huge issue in a bear market, right? And depending on where you think the bear market is going to land. I mean, if you think that Bitcoin's going to 500,000, maybe we'll come back down to 100,000 and that's it. So most of these dollar cost averages will be even. But what happens if we keep going higher and these companies keep buying and buying and buying and buying? And then the market drops, right? Because remember, the market can stay solvent longer than you can. The market can stay solvent longer than MicroStrategy can. The market can stay solvent longer than any company or any person who thinks that they're smarter than the market. This is why, in my view, this whole discussion about the extended cycle, this is just to convince people that the market is not going to be over when the historical data shows us it will be. And so these people will continue to buy that dip while the billionaires and the smart money are selling into the dip, right? Or it's really a rip for them, but essentially, right, any dip that's going down in a bear market or in the rotation to a bear market. Uh, Anytime you buy, you're selling it to somebody or buying from somebody who's selling. And so this is really important to understand because nobody knows where the top of the market is. Even myself, right? When we're talking about the extended cycle, I don't know where the top of the market is. And I've said the extended cycle could potentially occur. But the likelihood of it occurring based on the data and based on the metrics is very unlikely. And personally, I want to be out way before most people think the top of the market is. Because otherwise, there may not be the liquidity to get out of the market, or you get so caught up in the FOMO that you miss out. We are literally at all-time record highs, and nobody's talking about selling any of their coins. Because Cryptoviser, we have an extended market. There's no need to sell right now. Okay, what about 150,000? Because an extended market just tells us how long we're going. It doesn't tell us how high we're going. So as I've showed you on the previous cycle, the top of the market was really in the beginning of 2021. I mean, I remember telling you guys in the middle of 2021, Vitalik Buterin stated in an interview, oh, the bubbles have already popped. And when I reported this in 2021, I was like, how have the bubbles popped? We've only dipped. But if you look, the second pump was basically, I mean, yes, it was higher than the first pump in 2021, but it was basically, it's very similar to what a double top looks like, right? Double top here, double top here. And so if you sold in the beginning of 2021 and then you just sat and didn't do anything, yeah, you may have lost on like a few $1,000s of upside, but you basically sold the top. It's the same thing like if we're at $150,000 and you purchase at $20,000 and you sell at 150,000 and then we go to 200,000. Are you really going to be angry at yourself that you didn't wait to 200,000 when you sold at 150,000? Right? And granted, most people are probably not selling like multiple Bitcoins. This is portions of Bitcoin, but I'm talking about the price of the underlying asset. And so a lot of people ask, Cryptoviser, you're always talking about, timing the market. Yeah. I don't ever say that I know where the top of the market will be. I guesstimate and I analyze and I predict, but I could be wrong. But I'm okay with being wrong if my thesis plays out. If I'm still in the profit, I'm still in the green. I'd rather leave in the green and leave some money on the table that I could have lost or gained on the upside if I just waited. But nobody knows until where the top of the market is until after the top of the market. And this is why this whole extended cycle thesis that is a repeat from 2022 and 2021, there's going to be no extended cycle. And even if there is, do I really want to risk this second upswing and missing selling and then being in a bear market for another maybe 4 years just to capture a little bit extra upside? To me, it's not worth it, right? And so this is where we have to identify what are the signals that we are getting towards the top of the market, and what Michael Saylor is saying here could be some of that. Saylor said that lots of non-economically interested parties are rotating out of the asset, meaning not out of Bitcoin. However, at the same time, a new cohort of investors are entering, right? BlackRock, Wall Street, different companies like MicroStrategy. He said a lot of Bitcoin, for whatever reason, was left in the hands of the governments, in the hands of lawyers, and in the hands of bankruptcy trustees. He said that many of the trustees do not have a 10-year investor mindset. And as Bitcoin's price began to rally, they took advantage and thought this is a good exit point to get liquidity. Bingo, bingo. This is exactly what the whole idea of the extended cycle is. I believe we're going to be topping out within 6 months, right, from when I'm recording this video. So basically before November, maybe into November, but I think before November, definitely before the end of the year. And so if that is the top before the end of the year, but everyone's like, no, but this person said extended cycle, this person said extended cycle. Well, what happened when people were saying that in 2021 and into 2022? We just kept dipping and dipping and dipping and dipping and dipping and dipping and dipping until we reached the lowest point, which was in the middle of 2022, which is the same time that this extended cycle, at least in the cycle, the same time frame in the cycle that they're guesstimating the extended cycle is going to go through this cycle. This is why I think it's complete BS. But then the question is, well, when do we sell? Well, Michael Saylor said, I think people less committed to the long term have taken the opportunity to exit the markets, and a whole new class of investors are entering by the way of ETFs and by the way of Bitcoin treasury companies. And this is true. But here's the deal, right? Like, no other companies are really following MicroStrategy's thesis. The ETFs are purchasing, but no other companies are really doing this. Now, granted, there are Bitcoin companies that are continuing to buy. Matador Technologies, this is a newer one that is listed on the over-the-counter markets. They basically are becoming a Bitcoin-centric identity as it expands into technology and investment activities. They're going to be buying Bitcoin. I do think that this is a potential good opportunity from an investment perspective, but again, there's risk because the idea behind what Michael Saylor is trying to do is this. Bitcoin is now deflationary due to strategies Bitcoin purchases. Institutional buying is changing the Bitcoin market dynamics as large organized entities gobble up newly mined Bitcoin. So here's the deal. Right now, I believe there's around 900 Bitcoin or 450 Bitcoin, something like that, between 450 and 900 Bitcoin mined per day. And so the idea behind the deflationary Bitcoin, which based on supply demand metrics would make the price go higher, is that if all the newly mined Bitcoin, the quote unquote inflation into the circulating supply, if all of that is purchased, then effectively there's no new supply coming on the market. And so if there's no new supply and the demand is the same or increasing, the price basically goes up. And this is the idea behind what MicroStrategy is doing, El Salvador, and all of these other Bitcoin-focused companies. If you look at like GameStop is looking to buy Bitcoin as a last-ditch effort. People are looking at this as a very positive thing, but I view this as a very negative thing because GameStop's business model is completely a failure, right? It's not a failure because it's just evolutionary failure, right? We have online, you could purchase games online. It's just too, I mean, how much money are they making on a game that they're selling and how many games are they selling in a day, right? It's a failed business thesis and strategy in today's day and age. And so they're buying Bitcoin as last ditch effort. I don't even think that they have a 10-year time horizon. And that's the issue with this thesis of MicroStrategy, because it only works if you have essentially diamond hands like Michael Saylor, which most of these companies do not have and will not have. And the companies that are buying the Bitcoin ETFs, they will sell as the market rotates. Maybe not all of them, but definitely companies are going to sell as the market rotates because their job is to, if they're in a mutual fund or some type of blended ETF that's buying MicroStrategy, their job is to increase the value of the underlying asset. And so the underlying asset is tracking Bitcoin and Bitcoin's going down into a bear market or prolonged bear market. It doesn't matter what the 10-year thesis is. Investors don't have the patience for that. They just don't. And that's an issue. And that's, I think, something that people are not really thinking about. No company, basically, outside of the Bitcoin maximalists, no major company has bought into the Bitcoin strategy. I want you to think about this. There were more companies back in 2021 buying Bitcoin than there are today. And I'm talking about non-Bitcoin maximalist companies. For instance, SpaceX or Tesla. Back in 2021, they purchased Bitcoin, right? You could say Elon is a crypto bull, but I don't think that he's a Bitcoin maximalist the way the MicroStrategy is, or Michael Saylor is. And so people are not looking at this, right? People are just irresponsibly long MicroStrategy, not understanding. Like I just saw a tweet the other day, people were like, oh, well, MicroStrategy's, when MicroStrategy hits $1,000, they're just going to split their stock. And it's like, no, they're not. They're just going to sell more shares onto the open market like Michael Saylor has stated he will do. They're not going to split the shares because their total maximum shares is 10 billion right now. Right? Outstanding is only around 300 million, 350 million shares. But remember, in January, They increased the total number of shares to 10 billion so that they can continue to sell new shares on the open market to raise more money to buy Bitcoin. But that's going to keep the price suppressed. And I don't think that the stock will ever split again because all Michael Saylor has to do is sell more shares on the open market, which he said he's going to do. So there's no reason to split the stock. And if they split the stock 2-1, that means they're going to have 20 billion shares. And what if they do 5-1? They're going to have 50 billion shares of the stock. Holders of this are going to be completely wrecked. And so when is the right time to sell? Well, we need to understand what else is going on, right? El Salvador continues to stack Bitcoin despite their deal with the International Monetary Fund, which told them that they would stop acquiring Bitcoin. But somehow they have some kind of loophole, or they don't care and they're just continuing to buy Bitcoin. Now, is this going to continue? I don't know, but 7 Bitcoin in a week, you multiply that by 50 weeks in the year, it's about 350 Bitcoin, right? That's taking out 7 Bitcoin every single week out of the newly minted Bitcoin or newly mined Bitcoin. MicroStrategy doing the same thing, potentially GameStop doing the same thing. But everyone's looking at this as all bullish, but it may not be. Because if we do rotate into a bear market, which we will at some point, what is going to happen to the prices? What is going to happen to the market? And so understanding all the risks, we have to see when the hype is starting to fade or when people are starting to grasp at anything like this, right? The Arizona formed a second state Bitcoin reserve in 1 week. So we covered just last week that the Arizona governor, I think that the governor vetoed a strategic Bitcoin reserve bill. And people were like, no, they didn't. No, they didn't. And I'm like, well, they kind of did because it's not really a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Arizona is now the first state to ensure that any unclaimed Bitcoin or crypto is never sold for cash. The law includes an establishment of a state-controlled Bitcoin reserve fund, which would also custody any other cryptos handed over to Arizona Revenue Department. This is not a reserve, guys. This is just them holding money that they was unclaimed, right? Somebody passes away, their estate goes into some type of legal process, and then the money is held until somebody claims it that they're in the will or it's their inheritance or whatever the situation is. This is the same thing. This is not an actual Bitcoin reserve. The Arizona is not going to use this crypto for anything. This is different than what the U.S. government on the federal level is going to be doing with the strategic Bitcoin reserve. Maybe the idea is that this is the first implementation, and then down the road they'll say, okay, now we need to start buying Bitcoin or start investing in other assets that touch Bitcoin. But this whole strategic Bitcoin reserve narrative, I don't really think it's happening this year. And everybody's so bullish on that happening. Even if Trump wanted to make it happen tomorrow, I don't think that he has enough support, especially with all of the nonsense that really the opposing political party is putting out in the whole crypto world. Trump and his family are trying to get rich off crypto. It's like they are business people, right? We are in a capitalistic society. To think that like Trump is going to become president and then his whole family is just going to stop doing business and they're going to sell off all their that's completely ridiculous, right? And I wouldn't expect them to do that. So I don't know. I think that there is a lot of bullish signs about what's happening in crypto, generally speaking, over the longer term. But for me, this cycle, it wasn't even the Bitcoin ETFs that I thought it was kind of baked in at some point. But the real catalyst for how long the bull run would last and how high we would go was how many companies follow the MicroStrategy thesis. And so far, none of them have. I mean, literally, none of them have. And so then, people say, but Cryptoviser, Bitcoin is not the only crypto. Like, you only talk about Bitcoin as the top and this and that and MicroStrategy affecting the whole market. Well, yeah, when Bitcoin moves, the whole market does move. And the altcoin market is kind of in the same predicament, right? We kept hearing over the last few years since the FTX collapse, Solana is the best thing that ever happened to crypto, the best thing that ever happened to technology. And I'm like, wait. FTX took down the whole crypto ecosystem last cycle, right? Like that was the macro bottom when they crashed, and took a lot of crypto with it, right? People didn't get their crypto back for multiple years. I think some people are still waiting. But meanwhile, everybody was still betting on that blockchain. Solana was built by and for the billionaires by FTX, right? FTX was one of the main funders of this protocol and one of the main pushers and bulls of this protocol in 2021. And so I'm not saying Solana doesn't have technology to succeed or that they didn't at the time, but it just is very interesting that everybody kept pushing Solana, pushing Solana, pushing Solana when it was built by and for the billionaires by FTX. And now we are in the final stages of the bull run. And still to this day, people say, Cryptoviser, you're just funding Solana. You've always been wrong about Solana. And I'm like, great. What technology has been released this cycle since the Bitcoin halving to show us that Solana is worth the valuation that it is, and that it wasn't just all meme coins? Because based on the data that we've covered on this channel, that's why it's important to hit subscribe and give the video a free thumbs up. That way you never miss a new video. Thanks to everybody who does give the video a thumbs up. Thanks to all our channel members here on the Cryptoviser podcast as well. If you do want to become a channel member and help support the channel, click the join button down below to learn more. And so we've discussed the Solana situation is that they have had millions or billions of dollars pumped in to develop the ecosystem over the last few years. And the only thing that we've seen is meme coins. And the data on the blockchain shows that in December and January, if you fast forward to today, revenue is down 97% from December's peak. And what was most of that revenue coming from? Meme coin trading and meme coin implementation and launches. That's it. And so if you think about, wait, all the amazing metrics that were pushing the price of Solana up were just based on meme coins. And when meme coins were plucked out of that scenario, everything cratered within Solana. So what did Solana bring us this cycle besides meme coins? I mean, this is the same scenario that we saw in the previous cycle with NFTs. And guess where NFTs showed up in the cycle? The final stage of the bull run. NFTs peaked in September, August of 2021. That's when NFTs peaked. I remember there were projects that we were following very closely on this channel that were pumping the F out of all of these NFTs. And people were saying, oh yeah, NFTs are the future. I'm like, guys, you're paying $3 million for a JPEG. Yeah, but I own it. It's on the blockchain. It's like somebody just right-clicked and saved it. Yeah, but they don't own it. It's like, so you're paying $3 million just to say that you own a picture of a monkey on a blockchain? Like what? $3 million? And all the infrastructure that was being put behind these NFTs. It was just a waste of money. And the meme coins, it's the same scenario. It's the same cycle. It's just different. Instead of NFTs, it's meme coins. No actual fundamental value. I mean, NFTs do have fundamental value in terms of, proving authenticity and stuff like that. But that's not what they were using it for. They were just using it for monkeys, right? I mean, literally, the Bored Ape Yacht Club or those type of NFTs. I mean, those are still worth quite a bit of money, but nowhere near where we were at the peak. And so when everybody's focused on meme coins and not on Solana, that's a problem. But the rest of the market's like, no, Cryptoviser, you've been wrong about Solana. Solana is going to pump. And it's like, based on what? Based on what? Now, if you say meme coins, maybe it will pump up based on meme coins. That's very possible in the final stage of the bull run. But then when do you sell? When are you going to know it's the top? When are you going to know that the rug is going to be pulled from meme coins? You don't. And so we have to look at where the market is, not the market that we want. And so we're in the final stages of the bull run, and we're hearing more of what we're going to have in the future. And in my view, effectively, let's just get into this. NASDAQ on Solana Vision sees progress with an opening bell launch. Okay. So Superstate, the tokenization startup, co-founded by DeFi OG person, announced a new stock tokenization product on Solana and Ethereum this morning. Named Opening Bell, this platform allows companies to natively issue their shares on chain. a notable innovation for tokenization of public equities. The Solana focused holding company called Sol Strategies became the platform's first participant. It says many in Solana were quick to celebrate the news because it's in its early days. Solana co-founder would sometimes liken the network to NASDAQ on the blockchain. Today, he penned a rare blog post alongside a lead economist outlining how Solana's path to creating a decentralized NASDAQ runs through the implementation of multiple concurrent leaders where different validators can create blocks at the same time. And again, this is just going into the whole conversation of tokenization. And while they are building products for tokenization, and NFTs kind of do play a role in tokenization in a way, this is not fully implemented and it's not fully baked. And really, there's no final product. Like, they're building these things now. So these things are probably going to show in the next cycle, not this cycle. This is hype around these ecosystems. And this could be really good for Solana, building tokenized stocks within the Solana ecosystem. But this is not where we are today, right? They don't have full implementation of this. Maybe they have a few stocks that are tokenized, but we're not seeing full implementation and full, Wall Street or large enterprise adoption of this technology just yet. And I do think that this is still in the testing phases. They're looking at MicroStrategy and saying, is MicroStrategy going to make it through another bear market? Maybe, maybe not. Remember, at the end of last cycle, what I was looking at was which cryptos made it through multiple cycles. If they haven't even been through one full cycle, one bear market and one bull market, I wasn't investing, and that was a good idea because most of those coins are worthless now from the 2021 cycle. And so Solana versus Ethereum, the banking group is revealing who wins. Now, I covered this in a recent video, but the Signum Bank, which is a Swiss and Singapore regulated digital asset banking group, ignited debate over the pecking order of smart contract platforms. And in the report, they said that Ethereum retains an undisputed lead in revenues and institutional adoption, yet concludes that the market narrative has swung decisively in Solana's favor, which is a reversal dramatic enough for the bank to describe Solana as the system currently overtaking Ethereum. But Ethereum's strategic pivot has led to 5 to 10% outperformance of Ether over Solana. Nonetheless, the authors concede that sentiment on Ethereum remains poor for now. Now, some of this may be changing because we have seen a little bit of a bump in Ethereum after its recent what's called the Pectra upgrade, which increases the scalability and throughput of the network. But are we going to $10,000? Well, like we were talking about at the beginning of the video, if everybody believes we're going to hit $10,000, the likelihood that we do hit $10,000 is diminished because the traders and the smart money will sell before then, putting immense sell pressure on the stock or on the crypto or stock, whatever it is. But we do know that, there are Ethereum ETFs and that there's probably going to be more diving into decentralized finance, especially with the current administration and the regulators kind of loosening up on crypto. And just the narrative around this, right, as companies start releasing products or starting new companies or changing strategies similar to what MicroStrategy has done, there's a potential that Ethereum is going to get some upside here and potentially get a lift because of all of this bullish sentiment in the rest of the market. But we're going to have to wait and see. The top of the market is really where you determine where the top of the market is, right? Figuring out when the right time to buy is, right? And so if we look at Bitcoin proxy stocks, like the Bitcoin mining companies, guys, my worst performing videos are the Bitcoin mining stocks. And so this is an indicator to me, these are going to perform better than most of the other stocks and cryptos that these people talk about because nobody's paying attention, right? TerraWolf, one of the big crypto miners, they had a Q1 loss amid rising costs. And this is one of the things that we talk about. As time goes on, these Bitcoin mining companies, they have to improve. If they don't improve their operations actually decrease, right? Because the difficulty of the network increases. The machines that are mining Bitcoin, if they don't upgrade them, the old machines don't mine as well as the newer machines, etc. So there's a lot of issues with these Bitcoin mining companies, but there's also opportunity. If we look at TerraWolf's a perfect example of a roller coaster round trip from 1 year ago. 1 year ago, we were in the $2 range. We went all the way up to about $9.30, it looks like, was the yearly high. And then we're basically back down to these $2 range. And so I could show this to any amount of people who understand crypto and Bitcoin, and they'll be like, I don't think that's a good investment. I'd rather invest in Solana. And I'm like, wait. Solana has already reached its all-time record high this cycle. It's the best performing crypto this cycle. What makes you think it's going to continue that way when we have literal Bitcoin mining companies that we've already heard from the president and the administration that Bitcoin mining is going to continue to grow? A lot of them are moving into AI as well to diversify their platforms. And if you just look at the board of directors on a lot of these companies, TeraWulf is a perfect example. I mean, they have people from the defense industries on their board of directors. I don't think that that's like a mistake. I think that they're looking at Bitcoin as strategic national security. And so implementing these board of directors with some of the defense contractors or defense companies involved, I mean, that should tell you where this is all going. Even the large Bitcoin mining companies like Marathon Digital that are basically buying Bitcoin, by the way, they also have earnings miss. But if we look at the 1-year chart of Marathon Holdings, we're lower than where we were last year. We were at $17 last year, into $20. And now we're at $15, which is half of the yearly high. Now, granted, I personally think Marathon Digital, because it is the largest Bitcoin mining company by market cap, there's less opportunity for gains here. But there's a lot of other ones like Bitfarms. We've been talking about, I mean, for a long time on this channel. But if you just look at the last 1 month, we're up 35% so far. This is only about $500 to $600 million in US in market cap. So there is a lot of opportunities that people are not paying attention to. And so while what I'm looking at is when these cryptos are topping out, where can I rotate into? Right? Until we actually hit the top of the market, which again, nobody knows when it's going to be. And this is where you have to be careful not to overtrade, because there will be a lot of people who overtrade, right? They sell, they rotate into another crypto, it goes up, they sell, they rotate into another crypto, they sell, they rotate into another crypto, and they keep doing this, but they keep reinvesting their entire amount, right? So let's say they invested $10,000 and then the crypto went up 3x, and now they have 30,000, they sell. Then they put 30,000 in another underperforming crypto, that goes up 3x, now they have $90,000, they sell, now they rotated that into something else. And then what happens is we start to rotate from a bull market to a bear market. And I don't know when that's going to happen, and nobody does. But all I know is it will happen, right? And so nobody knows when that's going to happen. But if you keep doubling down and keep putting your entire portfolio into another trade, and it keeps confirming the bull market, people lose sight and they just get into the FOMO and they forget that we're towards the end stages of the bull market. And so for me, once you start selling, if the market is still ripping, there is still great opportunity. I mean, towards the end of the cycle last time, I remember some cryptos were doing 8Xs in 3 days, right? But if you're not capturing that upside, somebody else will. That's the bottom line. Somebody else will. We saw this when Bitcoin, just at the beginning of 2025, Bitcoin went from $110,000 back down to 80,000. That's a 30% drop in 2 months. And so when we start rotating into a bear market, which we will at some point, I don't know when it's going to be. I guesstimate, again, if you've been following my videos, even at the beginning of this video, I said it. The time to sell is before the top of the market. And that's very difficult for a lot of people because they're going to say, but when is the top of the market? And the answer is nobody knows until after. Until we're in the bear market. You don't know where the top is until literally you're in the bear market. You don't know where the bottom is until you're in the bull market. So when we zoom out the Bitcoin chart, back in 2022, in the middle of the year, I thought that was the bottom of the market, right, in June. But then it went down a little bit further. But is there really a difference between 19,000 and 16,000? Not really. So whether the bottom of the market was 19,000 or the bottom of the market was 16,000, anywhere between 15 and 20,000 was the bottom of the market. And the higher end of the market, like I said at the beginning of the video, if you sell at $150,000 and Bitcoin goes to 300,000, yeah, you could have doubled what you took out of the market. But what if it didn't go to 300,000? You could have been in a lower position. And so you have to look at profit as profit. Yes, sometimes you see a coin go higher after you sold it, but guess what? There is a very high percentage of people that are not going to sell anything in this bull market, or they're going to overtrade. And we will be in August, September of 2026, and people are going to be completely dead broke. And sometimes it's not even going to be your fault, right? Because if you think about Celsius, FTX, Voyager, BlockFi, Terra Luna, all of these different companies that went under in the previous cycle. And by the way, if you don't know what I'm talking about with these companies, because you weren't around in the previous cycle, you need to learn what happened with those companies, because there was so much risk in the market and people were not paying attention to that. And, they lost all their money. And a lot of that was out of their control. I mean, it was in their control because they didn't have to keep their crypto on these exchanges or on these lending products. But a lot of people would not pull their money out. I remember in the middle of 2022, I told my viewers, guys, I am pulling my money out of these lending products. There's too much risk with all the lending companies going down. People were writing in the comments, Cryptoviser, you're an idiot. You should never pull your money out of that. That's free money. And then they were broke within 3 months. Were completely broke. They had no money, and there was no way to recover anything. It was 100% loss because those companies went bankrupt. 100% loss. And so personally, I would rather have a 15% gain, which is very small in crypto, 15%. I mean, these cryptos move in a day, 15%. I would rather have a 15% gain than a 100% loss. And you'll see, not just on my videos, on other videos, the people in the comments that say, like I told you guys, the other day somebody wrote in the video about the extended cycle that I was saying was not going to happen. Cryptoviser, nobody agrees with you. Cryptoviser, you're the only person on YouTube that thinks that the market is not going to have an extended cycle and that the top is soon. It's like, I don't give a fuck. Like, I really don't care who agrees with me and whose thesis disagrees with me. Because at the end of the day, it's my portfolio, it's my money, it's my decision, and it's my opinion. This is my analysis. You don't have to agree with it. That's fine. I listened to a lot of people's thesis. I listened to Raoul Pal saying extended cycle. I listened to Michael Saylor saying, Bitcoin is going to $10 million. But I don't necessarily agree with it. I think eventually we're going to hit a $10 million Bitcoin. But to think that we're going to hit 10 million next week or next month or next year, it's ridiculous. And I don't even think Michael Saylor believes that we're going to hit 10 million this cycle or next cycle. I don't think he believes that. But the people who listen to him, they don't care. They think that, right? And so if the market drops and you did not take any profits at the top, do you think Michael Saylor gives a shit? Because he's working with so much bigger money than you can even imagine that, like, he's probably never going to sell. But that's not right for everybody. Right? He's playing a very different game than the average investor. We're just trying to protect our retirements. We're just trying to make sure that our futures are safe because we don't have pensions. Social Security is not really going to be enough, right? And so that's what we're looking at. He's looking at generational, legacy. Similar to like Apple is still continuing, even though the founder is no longer with us, right? Apple is a legacy of decades and decades of technology. I personally don't think that it's great technology compared to like some of the others, but they still have done a great job over the years. Otherwise, they wouldn't be around now, right? And so we have to acknowledge that. And so you have to keep this in mind. Michael Saylor, Raoul Pal, Brad Garlinghouse, Donald Trump, like they're all playing a very different game than you and I. They're on a much higher level. They have a lot more money than us. They have a lot more money they can lose, a lot more money they can play with. I mean, it's really crazy as you really learn about more of the market. You see these YouTubers that you don't even, there's YouTubers that you watch, they have private jets, right? Like there's YouTubers that you watch that they're trading hundreds of thousands of dollars on one trade. And most people, they don't even have hundreds of thousands of dollars, let alone be able to just invest that like it's nothing. And so that's very important to keep in mind. Don't play their game because their game is not really for the everyday person, or it's not for protecting your retirement. It can help Because what Michael Saylor is doing effectively is trying to pump the price of Bitcoin through all of these purchases and, gathering other companies to do the same thing. So he's trying to pump Bitcoin. And so if you're holding Bitcoin, you have to respect that, right? I do at least. And he's doing it at a much higher level forever, right? He wants to keep buying Bitcoin, and I hope it works out. But there is risk there. And I understand that that risk could take down all of crypto, even if it's not MicroStrategy. If GameStop buys Bitcoin as their last ditch effort, and then they go bankrupt, and the bankruptcy estate says sell the Bitcoin immediately, that's going to cause fear in the rest of the market, and that's going to take down MicroStrategy. So MicroStrategy that put GameStop on to buying Bitcoin now may have their stock and valuation decreased by potentially billions of dollars because of their own doing. Convincing a company like GameStop buying Bitcoin is the right thing to do. Maybe it is. But remember, GameStop is potentially going to be buying at the top of the market. And so if they buy at the top and then they go into bankruptcy next year or the year after that, I'm not saying they will. I'm just throwing scenarios and analyzing this whole situation. Well, if they do go bankrupt in 26 or 27, because what is GameStop? Like, if they're no longer a retailer and they're becoming a Bitcoin strategy company, but they're buying at the top of the market, how is that going to look in a bear market? That's what I think about. And that scares me. Because I think that could take down a lot, right? All these companies that are getting more leveraged in Bitcoin. And so understanding that for my thesis and my investment strategy, when to sell is really up to you. But personally, I think this coming pump that we're in currently, when I'm recording this video in the middle of 2025, this is the pump to sell, or at least start taking money off the table. Because yes, we can go hyper parabolic as the extended cycle thesis states, but we could also not. And the not side is the risk side. You do not want to leave the bull market without profits. You do not want to leave the bull market holding all your crypto, because you can buy it back in a bear market. You could also buy it back in a bull market, because I get that question a lot as well. I've been asked this question a lot by people who don't agree with my thesis, and they say, "Well, Cryptoviser, what if you sell right here at $104,000, and we never dip below this point again, and we just keep going up?" My answer is, okay, so then what? I'm just starting again, right? It's never too late to invest. The idea is that you just invest, and you have a thesis and strategy, right? If you lose in the casino, it doesn't mean that you're always going to lose. And you can still make your money back on the next hand. But again, this is all gambling, and that's where the risk is. And so if you see, like if you're playing roulette, for instance, and the last 50 spins have been black, obviously it could be black again. But statistically, the likelihood is more red, right? It may come up black another 50 times. But if you understand the statistical thing over the course of time, you would say, okay, it's going to be red next. And then you're going to put your chip on there. And if you lose, right? Whatever you put down. But if you win, you double your money. That's a good bet when the last 50 spins were all black. And so when we're looking at Bitcoin, I believe in the thesis of Bitcoin, but I also want to capture some of that upside. I would imagine many of you do too. So if you sell at $104,000 and you're already up 500% from $20,000, and then Bitcoin never goes below $100,000 again, you're still up 5x. Nothing changed. And so then if you buy at 150,000, and then over the course of time it goes up to 250,000, you're still up. You're still up. And so personally, I don't know that there's a number. I don't know that there's an actual indicator of where the top of the market is. I haven't seen that yet. And I haven't been able to find any of that in any recent history of crypto. Okay, so nobody actually knows, but you can look for the signals, right? You can look for the signals. I would imagine the more inflows that we see from the ETFs, from these companies that are buying Bitcoin, when we get to the point where everybody just keeps buying Bitcoin or announcing they're going to buy Bitcoin, the price keeps going up just because they're saying they're going to buy it, that's probably the time. That's the liquidity. Because if GameStop buys 5 billion Bitcoin, $5 billion worth of Bitcoin, it's going to be one shot, right? Maybe over the course of a week or 2 weeks. During that 2 weeks, maybe the price goes up. But after that, where's the buying pressure? Maybe MicroStrategy, but they're not buying 5 billion at a time. They're buying 1 billion at a time. That still will cause uptrend. But if they don't have that 1 billion from MicroStrategy plus the 5 billion from GameStop, that could be a demand shock, the same way that we see a supply shock, and that could push us down. And then liquidations push us more down, and everybody's gonna be highly leveraged because this company's buying, this company's buying, and this company's buying. So everybody's in margin. And what happens when people are in margin and leverage? You get a minor decrease in the price of the underlying asset like Bitcoin, and then you just get a liquidation waterfall where you get people getting liquidated, which sells their shares or crypto at the market price, which pushes the price down even further, which causes more liquidations, more market sales, more liquidations, more, and it just keeps going on and on. And that could bring us to the bear market very rapidly, way quicker than we went into the bull market. And so that's kind of my viewpoint on this. There is no actual time when to sell. It's more of a feeling and indicators across the board. But nobody's going to know exactly when. This is where I say it's better to be early than to be late. Let me know what you guys think about this. Let me know when you're planning on selling, what indicators you're going to be looking at, or if you believe in this extended cycle. Don't forget to give the video a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button. Thanks to all of our channel members and everybody who gives the video a thumbs up every single day. I'll see you guys tomorrow, or when I see you right here on the Cryptoviser podcast, Crypto On.